Hello, I'm Olly and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, courtroom drama, science fiction and weird horror. It's my weekly wrap-up. So we are heading into a long weekend here in the UK. It's a bank holiday on Monday. I think it's a public holiday in the US as well. I think it's Memorial Day. So hopefully many of you will have long weekends of happy reading planned. I'm certainly intending to get some books under my belt this weekend. But today I'm going to talk to you about what I've been reading over the last week and also talk about what's been on the channel and what's coming on the channel. So I've got, I think, 5 books to talk to you about that I finished this week. The first of those was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. So I talked quite a lot about this and about Tom Sawyer in my video last week. So I'm not going to add too much more to that. I finished it. I continued to enjoy it. I thought it was a really nice mix of kind of humour and slight coming of age story. It's not quite a coming of age story, is it? But there's definitely elements of that. But also a really interesting dissection of of slavery and racism in the US. I thought Mark Twain did it all very, very cleverly. There was a lot of subtlety there, a lot of humour, but he managed to really nail his point as well. So I thought it was a very good book, and I completely appreciate why it continues to be a classic. And as I've said before, I read that as a kind of prelude to reading James by Percival Everett, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So I'm going to try and get that one read soon. After that, something very different but still enjoyable, and did touch on racism as well, actually. So this was A Matter of Conviction by Evan Hunter. So you may remember that Evan Hunter / Ed McBain is my favourite author, and I'm gradually working my way through books by him. So this is one from fairly early on in his career. I don't remember when it came out. Yeah, it says you've got a list here of other books by Evan Hunter, and there's only four other books, given he wrote dozens and dozens of books. Yeah, so it came out in 1959. And it's got a really neat concept. So the idea is there's this guy who's like an assistant district attorney in New York, and he gets given this case to prosecute, which is that these 3 white kids have stabbed a Puerto Rican kid and killed him. So he gets given the task of prosecuting those 3 white teenagers, and it turns out that one of them is the son of a woman he had a relationship with back when he was like a young man. They separated because he went away to fight in the Second World War, and she didn't wait for him, basically. So he still carries a bit of a torch for her. He's like moved on and is now married, but she comes to him and begs him to show some leniency towards her son. So it's really about him investigating exactly what happened in this case, and trying to get justice for everybody, really. So there were some really good kind of courtroom drama scenes in it, some good scenes of investigation. I felt it did feel a little bit, it was a little bit on the nose, I guess you would say, in terms of its, I mean, Evan Hunter was clearly a liberal, and he wears his liberal heart on his sleeve in this book, and I think he overplays it a little bit. I think there was a lack of subtlety to the arguments that he was making, but it is still an interesting examination of kind of gang violence in New York in the 1950s and the kind of racial tensions between the different groups. I think, kind of West Side Story kind of vibes to it. So I enjoyed it a lot. Not by any means Evan Hunter's best book, but it was still a fun and interesting read. After that, then, on to one of the 2 weird horror books I read this week. So that was The Earth Wire by Joel Lane. So read this for Horror Mayhem as my... when did it come out? I'm forgetting now. Did it come out in the 90s? Yeah, my 90s pick for the Decades of Dread theme, where I'm trying to read a book from each of the last 10 decades. So Joel Lane was a British horror writer, sadly passed away when he was only 50. And I'm gradually discovering his work. So I've read a short novel by him, The Witnesses Are Gone, recently, which I really enjoyed. This is a short story collection, and I enjoyed it just as much as The Witnesses Are Gone. But it's very strange. His writing is not really like anybody else's I've come across. And I think that comes out even more in his short stories than it did in that short novel, because they almost feel more like experiences sometimes than stories. They don't necessarily have what you would call a plot to them. You get some characters, you get a situation, you get some weirdness going on, and that's it basically. And he does leave a lot to your imagination. You have to kind of put together some of the pieces yourself. But they all also have this wonderful vibe of being like clearly set in a kind of fairly broken Britain, so that, you know, the kind of broken Britain of the Thatcher years, the kind of and the post Thatcher years as well. So a Britain that felt like it was succeeding for some people but really failing for other people, and it's the people for whom it is failing that Joel Lane really writes about. So lots of people kind of on the fringes of society, and lots of, you know, kind of scenes of urban decay and things like that. So I really, really like his stuff. I'm very keen to continue working my way through his back catalogue. I thought this was a fascinating read. But yeah, the horror is very, very strange, very subtle at times. Sometimes it's just one weird thing that happens in a story and the rest of it feels, you know, relatively normal. But they really stick with you. I thought it was a really very interesting collection. After that, then, some science fiction. So Serpent's Reach by C.J. Cherryh. So this came out, I think, in about 1980. And it was it's a science fiction book with a really interesting concept. So the concept is there's these kind of, I guess, like giant ant-like alien creatures who live in hives on various planets. And there's different kind of tribes of these aliens that are warring against each other. But they also have kind of almost like symbiotic relationships with humans on the planets they live on. So this centres on one of those humans, and it's really about how her, you know, kind of her people interact with these ant creatures, and, you know, there's a kind of a war, like a battle going on throughout the book that she is becomes involved in. So the kind of world building side of it, I thought was, and the concepts I thought were really, really interesting. It's quite hard sci-fi though, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of really hard sci-fi. It felt like it was a bit too much about the concepts and the ideas and not enough about the story to me. I can see that C.J. Cherryh was a very, very talented writer of science fiction, but I'm not necessarily a huge science fiction fan. So whilst there was a lot of kind of action and adventure type stuff in this book, which I did enjoy, overall it wasn't really a massive hit for me, but mostly I think just because it's not really my kind of thing. And then the final thing I finished this week was another very strange horror short story collection, this time the Imago sequence by Laird Barron. So again, like the Joel Lane book, and I didn't really say it about the Joel Lane book, but I got the sense with both of these books that whilst they are like short stories, there's so many themes, like common themes running through the stories in the two collections, not across the two collections, but within each one, that they almost feel like you are getting a glimpse into like this different world. So the weird world in the Joel Lane book, this kind of weird version of kind of 80s, 90s Britain. And in the Laird Barron book, similarly, a sense that there was a common theme in a lot of these stories about a kind of clash between American, like US culture and other cultures. So that was a theme that seemed to come up again and again. But also this sense of there being something weird going on, you know, beyond the world that we can see, like, you know, strangeness, and that strangeness much more to the forefront in the Laird Barron collection than the Joel Lane one. As I say, in the Joel Lane one, it's quite subtle at times. In the Laird Barron one, it as the stories progress, within each story, the weirdness becomes more and more and more until they often have like very dark endings. So I really enjoyed it. I thought the best story was the title story, the Imago sequence, which is about this weird set of photographs and this guy who is hired to investigate them and try and find like the final one of the set, which this collector wants to find. So yeah, very strange stories. I think Laird Barron has a fantastic writing style. I really enjoy the way he writes. I read his book Blood Standard a while ago, which was kind of a crime novel, but I thought that was excellent as well. There's just something about his language that I think works brilliantly for me as a reader. So yeah, enjoyed the Imago sequence very much indeed. The whole collection was great. I'm keen to read some more of his short fiction soon. So in terms of what I'm currently reading then, so I've got two things on the go at the moment. So one is an audiobook, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is great. Lots of people have recommended this to me, and I'm really glad I picked it up. It is really nicely done. So it's a story basically about two friends who end up making a video game together. They meet when they're kids, and continue to develop that relationship when they're kind of students and beyond that. But there's just something about the way their friendship is depicted and their characters are depicted and their backstories are depicted that's just really engrossing. You really, really want to find out what's going to happen, even though there's not really like a traditional plot running through the story. It's more like one of those books that's about someone's life and about someone succeeding. I'm reminded a bit of and I've forgotten her name now, the woman who wrote the 8 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. What's her name? Oh, Taylor Jenkins Reid. I got there in the end. So it reminds me a little bit of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. And there's a kind of a tradition in popular fiction of writing this kind of story. I guess a lot of Dickens is like this, really. And in like the 50s and 60s, Harold Robbins wrote books that are very much about this. They're just about a person or group of people who are interesting in some way. And I think Gabrielle Zevin is doing that style of book really, really well. It's just there's a warmth to it which I'm enjoying very much indeed. Every time I listen to a bit more of it, I feel like I'm meeting up with some old friends and like hearing about their lives. So yeah, it's a really wonderful book. And then the other thing I'm reading, which I've just started, so I'm doing a buddy reader this with MJ from the channel Reading This Life. It's The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monika Kim. So a fantastic title, I have to say. I really, really think it's a great title. I'm only about 10% in, and I'm not sure what I make of it so far. So far, it's basically just about these 3 women, a mother and 2 daughters, who are eating fish together. It's marketed as a horror novel, and there's been some bits that are a bit gross in terms of people eating fish eyes, hence the title. But so far, it doesn't feel like a horror novel. It feels more like a bit of contemporary fiction. So we'll see how I get on with it. I'm enjoying it, and I want to keep reading it, but it's not quite what I expected so far, I guess I would say. Right, so that's what I have read and am reading. In terms of channel stuff then, so last week you had a book haul from me. I've picked up some more books since then, so I will show those ones in a book haul fairly soon. But yeah, a book haul where I went through all the books I've received recently. I did a review of Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and I did my a video where I picked the books that are going to end up being in my TBR for July. So you may remember I did a video a while ago asking people to suggest and recommend books for me to read, and I've gone through that list and like randomly picked out, because the list ended up being over 100 long, randomly picked out 20 books that will make up my TBR for July. I now need to get hold of copies of those books. In the week ahead then, you're going to get my June TBR. So June is June on the Range, the Western themed reading event, so there'll definitely be some Westerns in there, but I'm going to try and read some extreme horror this month as well, or in June as well. So it'll be a TBR of 2 halves, shall we say. So yeah, you're going to get that. I'm going to do a video about hype around books. So there's been a few things that have happened recently, a couple of videos on YouTube and something in the news as well that made me think about this a bit. So I want to talk about kind of the hype industry that surrounds publishing. And then also, hopefully, I'm going to do a review of a new book which comes out this coming week. So it comes out on Tuesday by an author I really like. I'm going to get that book on Tuesday. I'm going to try and read it in time to do a review on Thursday. Let me know in the comments if you can guess what book it is. Anyway, I will leave it there. I hope you've all had fantastic reading weeks. If you have indeed got a long weekend this weekend, I hope you have a great weekend and get some good reading done. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.